Good evening, everyone. I think we're ready to start. Welcome to Strategy and Resources Committee on Thursday, the 26th of June. I'll just start with some general announcements. So there's no fire alarm due tonight, so if the fire alarm does go off, please make your way outside in an orderly fashion. If you could try and make sure your mobile phone is off, by all means use devices to access ModGov, but if we could try to avoid other uses. This meeting is being recorded for live and subsequent broadcast. I don't think we've got any external guests tonight, but if anyone does enter the chamber and sits in the public seating areas, they are consenting to be filmed. If you wish to speak, if you could raise your hand and wait for an invitation, and remember to turn your microphone off afterwards. Please face the microphone when you're speaking, and if you're referring to a particular report or slide or item, if you can make it clear which one you're referring to, that would be great. Thank you very much. So item 1, apologies. We've had apologies from Councillor Robert Brown and from Councillor Robinson. Do we have any other apologies? Yes, from Terry Cook and Linda Cohen. Thank you. Declarations of interest, item 2. Would anyone like to make a declaration in any item on the agenda tonight? No? Okay. Moving on then to the minutes of the meeting of the 3rd of April. Did anyone have any questions or comments on those minutes? No? Would you mind raising your hand to show that you're happy with those then? Great. I think that's everybody. We have no public questions tonight at item 4 and no member questions at item 5. So I'm going to jump straight on to our first main item, item 6, which is an update on the local development scheme. And I'd like to introduce James Brain, who's our Head of Strategic Planning and Economic Development, to present this report. Over to you, James.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. So the local development scheme sets out the timetable for preparing the local plan and other planning documents. The council is required to prepare and maintain this local development scheme as part of its statutory plan making process. The council has to ensure that it remains up to date and reflects current planning regulations and government guidance. So the main points on this report this evening, as you can see in Appendix A, the updated local development scheme is there, and it sets out the current documents that make up the development plan for Stroud District and all the other relevant planning guidance, such as the 2015 adopted local plan and County Council's mineral and waste plans and all of our adopted local plans over the past few years. The local development scheme then sets out the proposed future documents that will be produced to maintain an up-to-date development plan, which we're required to do, and all the other relevant planning guidance documents. This must include an indicative timetable for the next local plan, and the timetable sets out new milestones that have to be met when meeting, that we have to meet with the government in terms of creating the next local plan. And members are not being asked to make a decision on a local plan, and we will come back to this later, largely as a result of having concluded the draft local plan making process. The updated development scheme and its accompanying report do not include specific details regarding the content, financial aspects, legal considerations, detailed work programmes or policy directions of a future local plan or other planning documents. The local development scheme serves solely as an indicative timetable produced in accordance with the government's requirements. Each future document proposed within the local development scheme will be subject to the Council's full democratic processes as they progress, and this will include, where required, member approval, public consultation exercises and formal adoption process procedures at the appropriate stages. At present, elected members are required simply to note and approve the indicative timetable for publication as required by the government. And just lastly, this is very helpful for planning officers in particular as a result of the new plan making system that we're expected to be consulted on later this year, and the regulations that will then result from that. It will allow us to access training from the government and will indicate that we intend at some point to update the local plan against those new regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's start with questions then. Any questions for James? But it's such an exciting document. Gary?
James, it talks about the government expecting people to do it in 2 years, or authorities. Do we know of any authorities that get it done in 2 years?
Under the current regulations, very, very few. But again, the government is proposing fairly radical changes to the plan making process. So the plans that we see currently will be considerably different in the future. For those that remember maybe sort of 20 years ago of core strategies, for any planning fans out there, it will be largely a similar document to that. So you'll see a plan rather than being 200 pages, maybe about 50 to 60 pages that focuses on those strategic allocations and maybe a few local policies. But again, we are waiting for all the sort of information on that, which the government has been promising a consultation this spring, but it feels very much like summer at the moment.
Thank you. So this is obviously published as part of the papers for the meeting, but it will also sit on the website, will it, under the strategic planning section?
Yes, this will form what's called part of our local development framework, which is a folder of documents. At some point, we'll need to update another statutory document, such as the statement of community involvement, and that will also need to come to this committee and will be published on the website as well. But yes.
Lindsay.
Thank you. Just following on from Councillor Luff, does that, with the change in the timescale that we do this, is this going to have an impact predominantly on public engagement?
No, if anything, what this this paper this evening doesn't commit us to preparing a new local plan, but it sets out an indicative timeline that, and the government's making clear in all sorts of ministerial statements and other communique that councils are to have up-to-date local plans. Once we got clarity on the draft local plan and concluded that, we then need to move into that next local plan phase, and we need to assess our options in that. But it very much is about community engagement with yourselves as part of that process. And from what we understand, there'll be at least one, if not two rounds of consultation in the new regulations as part of a new local plan.
Thank you. Martin Piercy.
Thank you, Chair. On page 27, you've got that the community infrastructure levy is going to be reviewed at the same time, which seems a eminently sensible thing to do. Is that the normal procedure? Other councils normally do that?
That's fairly normal. And in particular, when you do an updated local plan, you'll look at the viability of development and the policies that you're requiring of new development. And that goes hand in glove with the community infrastructure levy. It's been a fair few years since we've done that, and we need to assess that. And also, I think it'd be really helpful to work in partnership with the county council on that and making sure that they're able, wherever possible, to deliver the necessary infrastructure. We're working closely with them on education provision, which we know they have struggled with. So it's as much as a commitment, as much as part of just sensible plan making, as much as anything.
Catherine.
Thank you, Chloe. James, a question about neighbourhood planning. So this is 5.0 on page 27 as well. And it references current progress with neighbourhood plans. It looks like some haven't progressed for 10 years. So have they just stalled and stopped, or will they continue? And then another question around funding for neighbourhood planning. There's been some question about whether that is going to stop and whether it's something which would be affected, which, if there is no longer funding, would that affect any progress that could be made? Thanks.
So in response to your first question, yes, so we look at Chalford there at June 2014 and Wootton Under Edge at March 2015. What we've got there is they made a commitment to designate their area, which a lot of neighbourhood plans did in those early days, because you got an immediate cash injection for doing that, and then the government pulled back from that in later years. And for whatever reason, they did not decide to proceed beyond the designation. That could be for all sorts of reasons, which unfortunately I don't have the information on that, but that's not unfamiliar. That's fairly common, and in fact, other authorities have seen far more than the 4 that we see here, or certainly the 3 in particular, because Bisley appears to be making some progress. In response to your second question about funding, yes, I understand the government's intention is to remove funding for neighbourhood development plans, and I think it'd be, well, I will be raising this with the county planning officers group as to whether we should be getting in contact with the ministry or MHCLG or the government to establish, are they looking for other mechanisms? And in particular, it's going to be quite interesting given that the government, through the local government review process, and we go towards a more unitarisation and then a more strategic plan going forward, and us missing the district plans, you would expect that the neighbourhood plans maybe take a little bit more of the weight in the plan making process. So I was surprised to see that, and I think it would be useful to have some clarity on that. There have been some questions through the SIL process as to whether neighbourhood plans could use the neighbourhood proportion, but I would want to seek clarification from the government on that. But yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
No more questions, so I'll just read the decision. The committee resolves to, number 1, note the content of the new local development scheme 25 to 29 in Appendix A, and 2, approve the publication of the new local development scheme. Would anyone like to propose that? I'm happy to do that. How about seconder? Katie, lovely. Katie, would you like to speak now? Okay, so we move to debate then. Anyone have any comments about this? Nope. Back to you, Katie.
Thank you. Thank you, James, and your team. It's clearly going to be quite ambitious to get this local plan produced in timescale, so you've got a lot of work to do. But I was really encouraged to see the addition of a Stroud District Design Guide in the development scheme. It looks like a great opportunity for us to put some ambitious challenges to our residents and to the council to find out really what we want to see in terms of our local community and design principles. So I really welcome this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And yes, thanks from me too. I think it's an extremely helpful document, particularly for newer councillors in pulling together all the many, many planning documents that we work with. So really useful. So I'm going to move to the vote now. Please raise your hand if you're in favour. And that's everybody. Great. Thank you very much. Move on then to item 7, which is the social value policy and social value measures. And I'd like to introduce Sarah Turner, who is our Senior Procurement and Commissioning Officer, to present this report. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. The report includes the renewed social value policy and the proposed methods of measuring social value going forward. Just as a bit of background as to what social value is, it's governed by legislation, and under the Social Value Act, all authorities have a duty to consider how our services contracts provide benefits across the district, and is measured in terms of contributions to social, economic, and environmental outcomes. This means that social value benefits above the subject matter of the contract that we are already paying for, and it is the supplier's chosen additional social value outcomes that are based on our measures that we put out with a tender opportunity. Our renewed policy Appendix A continues to exceed the requirements of the Act, which only requires considerations of service contracts, but we also include goods and works contracts, so it's over the requirement of the Act. And we will continue to set the social evaluation in tenders at 10% of the quality evaluation. The renewed policy has expanded on the previous policy to include a national context, which includes the Procurement Act and the National Procurement Policy Statement. I've also included what social value means to Stroud, our aims and objectives around social value, and how any social value created contributes to the council's priorities included in the council plan. And I've also included future developments in what we measure in relation to social value. The policy also sets out a tiered approach to applying social value in contracts with different thresholds for different types of contracts, with goods and services having a lower threshold for applying social value and works having a higher threshold rather than a flat threshold for all contracts. Just to talk about how we measure social value and a bit of background of what we've done up until now. Under the Social Value Act, there are no mandated methodologies or measurement tools that have been identified. So it is up to each council's choice as to how and what to measure. For the past 4 or 5 years, we've been using the Social Value Portal and also the National Framework of Themes, Outcomes and Measures, or abbreviated TOMS, if you hear anyone talking about how we measure social value. The National Framework has over 200 different measures, and we have chosen 29 of those measures that reflect our activity called our Master TOMS. As our understanding of social value has progressed over the past few years, we now want to develop our social value measurement so it's more aligned to our council plan, and we would also like to develop our measurement so it includes other activities such as council projects that may not incorporate any kind of procurement to see how social value is being created in the district. If we choose to do this through our existing social value portal, there would be additional costs involved, and SLT have agreed that the contract for the social value portal need not be renewed at the end of September, as it doesn't provide the flexibility for us to include other areas of measurement over and above our procurement activity. The policy and governance team have carried out a lot of research with other authorities locally and through the South West Social Value Task Force to understand what other authorities are doing at the moment. Many are creating their own measures that reflect their local priorities. We've also consulted internally with officers, and the outcomes of this is shown at paragraph 2.19 in the report. And paragraphs 2.22 and 2.29 sets out how we're proposing to measure social value in future. We are proposing a new suite of measures that are shown at Appendix A that more fully reflect our council plan priorities, and these will continue to be developed and added to over the next few months in consultation with officers and members, and we will have proxy values against these measures to allow us to do the tender evaluation. Also to mention is that part of our community wealth building activity, the company Claire's, who is supporting us with that, will also be providing us with some additional support in developing the measurement tool and our measures, as well as supporting us with developing a proportionality and relevance check at the start of any procurement activity. We're holding a member briefing session about these proposals on Wednesday the 2nd of July, and member feedback will be incorporated into the measures and we will report back to ALT in August. We're also consulting with One Legal on the types of contract terms and conditions we can include in contracts relating to social value, and we will be carrying out awareness raising with existing suppliers and businesses so they know what we're doing. Officer training sessions will be held in August and September. I hope you can see that it's quite a positive way forward with in terms of measuring our social value, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Sarah. Questions? Yeah, Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Great piece of work. I'm wondering what flexibility, the list of measures, is there flexibility in how we would assess a contract so that if a supplier said under one of the council plan aims they add social value in a way that doesn't exactly match one of those measures, so is there that sort of flexibility, so the measures are not an absolute definitive list? Does that make sense?
We need a set of measures to enable us to evaluate as part of the tender process. So we would always need a quantitative element of social value measurement. If a supplier has chosen to say, well, we think we're already doing this, so we would need to build in a qualitative element and how we evaluate that if we wanted to do that going forward. It is possible to incorporate qualitative and quantitative evaluations. At the moment, it will just be qualitative.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Any other questions? Yes, Martin and then Lindsay.
Thank you, Sarah, for your reports. Just some sort of context, really. I mean, I remember when the social portal was sort of introduced 4 years ago, and we had those great big thick wads of paper with all the things that you measured. I mean, are a lot of councils moving away from what was sort of an early, you know, the social portal use and Tom's into their own models? And then the second question is, have we been able to sort of garner any sort of comments or thoughts from the supply chain themselves to say, oh, this is a good idea, I'm glad you're doing this, or anything like that? Thank you.
To answer your first question, yes, people are moving away from what at the time was the best way to record social value. But our learning has taught us that we need something that's probably a little bit more simpler for our requirements and our amount of spend that we do as a local authority. And that's what we're trying to do, is simplify it and make it easier for officers to understand what's being delivered, and also for our suppliers. So yes, other authorities are moving away from this portal and developing their own set of measures and measurement tools. In terms of suppliers' thought, it's only been fed back through to me from officers in their workshops to say some suppliers find the portal a little bit difficult to use if you're not using it regularly and you haven't got many contracts that you're using, then it's a bit difficult to keep going in, and a lot of the terminology around local economic value and the committed and delivered sets of social value, it's a bit confusing as to what is actually being delivered and has been delivered.
So, by inference, then, these new, more simplified measures, suppliers should be able to sort of understand them more readily and therefore be able to engage with them.
Yes, what we're trying to do is make it relate to our council plan, and therefore the measures reflect the council plan, and therefore we can say we've got more tangible evidence of what's being delivered in the district.
Thank you, Lindsay.
My question has now already been answered. Thank you.
Bob.
I probably should know the answer to this, but do we have reports on what social value has been delivered in the past and what we'll be seeing in the future? Now it is going to be simpler, quantifiable stuff that we can say.
Absolutely. I do an annual report to this committee on procurement and contract management, and I've always incorporated social value in that. I should have maybe explained in my introduction, the contracts that are already on the portal will remain on the portal. Those suppliers have their own agreement with the social value portal. So through our contract management activity, we will need those suppliers to provide that information to us for the remainder of the duration of the contract. But yes, you will get regular reports and have had reports.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Sarah. Mine's very quickly. Is there a review period for this policy, given that we're changing things now?
I'm sorry, I missed. Is there
A review period?
for the new methodology? Absolutely. As part of the recommendations, I've asked for delegated authority to make minor changes to the measures, and that's only if a council plan action is completed and there's no longer any point in measuring it. But yes, my idea is it would be reviewed annually.
Looks like no more questions, so I'll read out the decision. The committee recommends that Council A, approve the renewed social value policy and the new social value measures, and B, delegates authority to the Deputy Chief Executive and Strategic Director of Resources to make minor amendments to the social value measures. So I would like to propose this one. Do we have a seconder? Martin, would you like to speak now?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just say thank you, Sarah. I think it goes without saying that we would want to see the best social value provided by our suppliers over and above the content of the contract, and it sounds very sensible to replace one with, 200 measures with a more wieldy and more appropriate set of measures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, at this point, before we go into the debate, I would like to propose a friendly amendment, which I think we've got up on the screen there. So we had some feedback about the measures that are in the report, wondering whether they reflected the full extent of the measures that we could have in seeking to tie back to the council plan. I think, Sarah, you're going to take the measures away, aren't you, and look at them over the course of the summer. As Sarah mentioned, we've got a member feedback event coming up in July. So this amendment just reflects that, really, and the fact that Sarah will be coming back to Strategy and Resources on the 2nd of October for the final approval of the measures in their ultimate form. Just had a question from Catherine about whether we need any amendments in section B in relation to the Deputy Chief Executive and any succession, or is it sufficient with the wording that we've got there, do you think?
I think it's probably sufficient with the wording. I'll look to Stephen, but normally if someone departs, a sort of a suitable replacement for that delegation is found from within the structure, I would say.
Yes, Belter braces is that when the new appointment is made, it's made clear that that person exercised all the previous delegations for the predecessor.
I was hoping you were going to say Andrew couldn't leave, but okay, fine. In which case, do we have a seconder for the amendment? Martin, are you happy to do that? Would you like to speak to the amendment?
No, I'm happy with the amendment, and yes, I think it would be very good that we can get some more feedback and some modifications as wanted in the strategy.
Okay, super. So now I'm required to check whether the amendment's been accepted by the initial proposer and seconder, but that's you and me anyway, so I think we're fine. Does anybody want to debate the amendment? No? Good. Okay, T.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that it's really good to see that the measures go further than those required, which enables us to reflect our own priorities as a council in those measures. Thank you.
We will come back to the debate on the main. No, don't worry. I've got a flow chart in front of me. That's the only reason why I know what's going on. So if we could just vote on the amendment then first. So if you could raise your hand if you're in favour. Great. Lovely. That's everybody. So now that will become the recommendation. So now we will move to debate on the recommendation. So would anyone like to speak to this? No. Okay, lovely. Martin, a seconder, anything further to say before we finish?
I second my previous comments now on the amended, the modified proposal.
Thank you. Big thank you to Sarah for this report. I think it's really great. It's been really interesting to see this process evolve over the past few years, and really great to hear that we're doing peer learning from other councils, and that we're going beyond what we have to do on a statutory basis. And I think that exercise of seeking to tie the measures more closely back to our council plan will be really valuable. So thank you very much. So if we could then vote on the main item, if you are in favour, please raise your hand. And that's everybody. Thank you very much. That passes. Great. Thank you, Sarah. We'll move now on to item 8, which is the General Fund and Housing Revenue Account Outturn Report for 24-25. And I'd like to introduce Lucy Clothier, Accountancy Manager, to present this report. Over to you, Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So this is the outturn report for the financial year 24-25 for both the General Fund and the Housing Revenue Account. There is a lot of detail in this report. I won't take you through all of it, but I'll just pick out some of the key points. Obviously, I'm happy to take any questions. If there are any specific queries, I may need to take those away. Overall, it's a very positive outturn position for both the General Fund and the HRA. If we look at the General Fund first, we have an underspend of 0.355 million, which is an improved position from Q3. On top of that, we have the business rates pool gain of 604k. giving us a total underspend of 0.959 million. So that business rates pool gain is something that we don't include within the base budget because of the risk involved with the pool arrangements. The difference from that Q3 report that last came to Strategy and Resources Committee is mainly due to additional planning income, which has reduced the expected pressure on development management, so absolutely brilliant news, and additional investment income. There is another line within this report that sets out a reduction in capital value in one of our long-term investments. This is something that has been long reported, but due to the closing of this particular fund, it's now being recognised in our accounts. We do have funding set aside to cover this, so it doesn't impact on the amount of funding we have to deliver services, but we just wanted to kind of set it out to make sure that you were aware that that has now been recognised. So that total underspend position has been allocated as set out in section 4 of the report on page 59. So we have some funding set aside for some initial local government reorganisation costs and some known IT costs as well. The business rates gain is put in the business rates pilot reserve, and from there it is available to allocate to the canal project later on if that's what you choose to do. So there are 2 newly identified areas of spend, so £64,000 match funding for Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust for the reintroduction of beavers. That one is a specific decision within the decision box, and also 20k for nature grants. The remaining 127k goes back into returns to the equalisation reserve. That then becomes available within the medium-term financial plan. So the MTFP that was last presented in February had assumed that we would have an overspend position of 493k. That was the position at Q2. That is obviously no longer needed. We've got this underspend position and we're transferring an additional 127k to that reserve. So we've actually got an improved position on the MTFP by a total of 620k, that difference in the equalisation reserve. Kind of thinking about the MTFP, last week government published the Fair Funding Review consultation. It does give a lot more information than we've previously had about the Fair Funding Review, but we still don't have any specific allocations, so we can't be sure of our actual position over the coming years. We are still expecting that our funding will reduce, and we know that the business rates reset will reduce the amount of business rates income that we receive going forward, but we don't know how much by yet, and we don't know what transitional arrangements may be put in place. We do have reserves set aside for this purpose to help provide cover over the medium term to kind of take us through this period of reduced funding. We will be looking to issue a briefing paper on this consultation to group leaders, and we will be engaging with members leading up to the budget setting process as well. So moving on to the HRA, the entirety of the HRA position has already been considered at Housing Committee in full, and a total underspend of 2.784 million has been reported. This is also an improved position from Q3 of 638k, and that's primarily due to investment income and reduction in support charges from the general fund. So the allocation of the HRA's underspend is set out in section 9 on page 65. It does include 1.534 million returning to HRA general reserves, and that is what was assumed within the HRA MTFP in February. That is what was needed in order to give us that maintained balanced position over the medium term. The remaining underspend is allocated to largely tenant-focused areas, so tenant involvement, communications, funding for damp and mould assessments and works. We've also set aside £500,000 towards the Sustainable Energy Programme. As part of budget setting, we had made assumptions around social housing decarbonisation Wave 3 funding, which we were successful in gaining, but unfortunately not as much as we'd assumed. So we're putting aside money just to help us continue that programme. So with that transfer of just over £1.5 million to HRA General Reserves, the HRA MTFP remains in the same financial position as was reported in February. So having a quick look at capital, so the general fund capital spend totals £13.3 million. The big areas of spend include the canal project, which you'll hear more about later, private sector housing grants of 3.8 million, and the purchase of vehicles for the multi-service contract with Ubico of 3.4 million pounds. There is slippage of 2.1 million pounds, and that's mostly the multi-service contract vehicles and the Active Lifestyle Stroud and Lido maintenance programme. The HRA has capital spend, this is 13.6 million, which 9.4 million was on major works on our existing properties, with 1.9 million pounds spent on acquisition of new properties to add to our stock, and 1.7 million on the new build programme. And there's net slippage of 1.7 million in the HRA. So there's a lot of detail in the appendices with a breakdown by committee, split of the capital programme and financing. So hopefully you've seen all the information you'd like to know. However, I am happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That was a really helpful walkthrough. So any questions for Lucy? No? Okay. Well, it's a very helpful walkthrough then. In which case I will read the decision out. The committee resolves to note A, the general fund revenue outturn position for 24-25 as shown in table 1. B, the housing revenue account outturn position for 24-25 as shown in table 6. C, the transfers to and from earmarked reserves for the year as detailed in sections 5 and 10 and appendix G. D, the capital programme outturn position for 24-25 as shown in appendix H. E, the slippage of the capital programme budget and the revised capital programme budget for 25-26 as shown in appendix J. And the committee resolves to approve F, match funding of £64,000 to Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust for the introduction of beavers to the River Froome. Particularly excited about the last one. So do we have a proposer? Catherine. And a seconder? Bob. Would you like to speak now, Bob? Okay. So we go to debate then. Would anyone like to say anything in relation to this item? No? Okay. In which case, Bob, back to you.
One of the many privileges of being the chair of the Audit and Standards Committee is I get to go to regular meetings of other chairs of Audit and Standards Committee, which is a joy. And every time I go, I think how well served we are by our officers around the General Fund and Housing Revenue account. So just really a thanks and a congratulations for continuing to keep us solvent and well managed. Much appreciated. And I too am very excited by the introduction of beavers. I think we should spend more and do it everywhere. I've got a pond, I could do with one.
Thank you, Bob. Right, so any comments from the proposer, Catherine?
Yeah, thank you. Just to echo Bob's thanks to the whole team. It's a huge piece of work, and I did enjoy reading through all the appendices and finding out about how we've spent our money over the past year in all sorts of interesting ways. So it was a fascinating read, I think, for anyone wanting to know the progress that we're making, and so many things have been achieved over the last year in terms of the capital programme, which again is quite a significant programme for the HRA as well as for the general fund. And great to see there's improved positions in relation to the previous financial reports that we've had for both General Fund and HRA, reflecting increases in income as well as an investment income and planning income and across the board. So it's a really positive end of year position and I hope everyone will support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. So we move then to the votes. If you could lift your hand if you're in favour, please. Great, that's everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lucy. So we'll move now to item 9, which is the canal project update and funding request. And I'd like to introduce Chris Mitford-Slade, who is the canal project director, to present this report.
Chair, thank you. And committee members, I'll try and keep this brief, but I'm very conscious that I gave you a very detailed pack. lots of background information and quite a few supporting appendices as well. But I will try and keep this brief. The council has been at the forefront of restoring the Stroudwater Canal for over 15 years. And that was a strategic decision which the council took back then in 2006. And it was supported by funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund of £12.8 million. That first phase was completed in 2017, and we were very thrilled that HRH, the Prince of Wales, the current king, came down and opened that section of canal. For those of you who are relatively new to the canal, and I'm certainly one of those, is that you probably won't appreciate actually what the canal looked like before that restoration started. You just have to look outside this building here. There was no canal. It was completely filled in. And if you just walk down this area here to see the amazing housing, this building restored, the cafes, the shops, the communities, this project is not just a restoration project. And the strategic aim to set out in paragraph 1.4, it is very much a transformative project, leaving a legacy for communities, wildlife, heritage, and also significant economic benefits. And quite a lot of that has been realised already with the first phase of the work, which was between Stroud and Stonehouse. In 2020, the National Lottery Heritage Fund supported the second phase of the works, and that was to reconnect to the National Canal Network at Sewell Junction. It required some major infrastructure projects, such as the Ocean Railway Bridge going under the M5, Walk Bridge, A38 roundabout. These are not small projects. It is a very, very big, complex, ambitious project. And actually, the Stroudwater Canal is the oldest existing navigation authority and canal company in the world. It's something to be proud of. And in 2029, which is when, with the required funding, we aim to complete the canal, will be the 250th anniversary. So to be able to leave that legacy for future generations and to give the canal another 250 years of life would be an amazing legacy to leave for future generations, and something that we should all be duly proud of. However, when we were awarded the funding back in 2020, and I joined the project the following year in 2021, you may recall we were in the midst of COVID, and we've had some pretty extraordinary years over the last 5 years with COVID. The Russian invasion of Ukraine, I won't go on with the current fighting going on around the world, but it seems to be getting completely out of control. And rising inflation and the current challenges economically that we all face. It's of no surprise that this project requires additional funding in order to complete the project. All the National Lottery Heritage funded projects have needed more money, and the Lottery Fund set aside a COVID fund to give additional funding towards their existing projects. They were going to, we put together a bid for that COVID fund back in June 2023. And at that point, our proposal was to ask for an initial grant to allow us to half complete it, and then a final grant to do the full completion. At that point, they would request us to go back and submit a full bid to go to the full complete restoration and to make every possible cost saving we could to achieve that. We've now done that exercise, and we've put together a proposal which requires contributions from all project partners and also match funding the Lottery Heritage Fund. Where we've got to date with that, if you have a look at Table 2, Table 2 sets out the funding gap for the project, 10.5 million, and I'm sure I've got some questions around that, which I'll be happy to answer, why that figure is and what we've done to get down cost savings we made for that piece. But that is the actual funding gap. And to achieve that, we are requesting for the lottery an additional 6.4 million with match funding of 4 million from project partners. The breakdown of that 4 million is shown in Table 4. And I'm delighted to say that last week, the Stroud Valleys Canal Company, their board of directors approved that 200 grand grant in there. GCC earlier this year, as part of their budget review at the beginning of this year, awarded a further £1 million into the project. The Cotswold Canals Trust Board, they sit next week, but they've already reallocated that funding. They were going to put 300 grand into a project on the eastern section of the canal. They're going to switch that to the western section because that's the priority. And they will sign off at that 750 at their trust council next week. And we also have the active travel grant. So if we're able to secure a further £1.5 million contribution from Stroud District Council, which is the request that we're making here at this committee to put forward to the council for approval, that would have a contribution of 4 million from partners. We are working with the bid, the lottery, to seek 6.4 million from them with that match funding. And what's really critical with, as part of this funding request, is that the lottery need to make sure that there is no risk on them from their contributions, and that we can complete and deliver the project. And so what's set out within this paper is that we allocate a further £1.5 million as match partner funding, and also that as the accountable body to the project is that the council will be responsible for any funding shortfall or cost increase, save for the additional funding for the lottery application that's going to be made. So it's important to understand that, and that will give the surety and confidence to the lottery which they need in order to commit a significant fund into this project to support the match funding from project partners. So that's a very brief overview of a complex project.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm very conscious there are a lot of papers here tonight. This is a really important decision for us. Those of us who sit on the project board have been through this over many months, line by line, but I appreciate it's newer for some of you. So welcome questions for Chris, starting with Lindsay.
Thank you for that. I've got two questions. One is, what happens if we don't get the lottery funding? And then secondly, I see that at 1.13 on page 121, it says about the one remaining risk for securing the funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund is having a land agreement with Ecotricity. Do we know where we are with that, if that is progressing and is progressing in a positive way?
Thank you for that question. To answer the first question on the funding from the lottery, what would happen if they did not put in that funding into the project? It's very clear from all the partner funding is on the basis that the lottery do contribute their full commitment of 6.4 million. We have we work very closely with our account manager within the National Lottery Heritage Fund, having another call with him next week to discuss this point. They did suggest we put in a revised proposal which was take up further costs, which would not enable us to complete completion. We are going to put together that proposal, but we're not going to recommend it because we don't think that it's the right thing to do. But if we do not get the full funding from the National Heritage Fund, we will have to go back to all project partners to explain the situation to them to see whether they are prepared to still commit funding into the project. So it is a very valid point, but it's very clear that this funding is on the basis that the National Lottery Heritage Fund do commit to the full funding and that we can complete and deliver and get reconnection for the project, because we will not achieve the economic benefits without the full reconnection. The second question around the Ecotricity land acquisition, we have been working with Ecotricity for the last several years on this. we are in a position, they are committed to the project. They are very supportive of the restoration project. They wish to link it in with their Eco Park planning application, which clearly is not the right thing. But the options on the table are either a lease arrangement, an extended lease arrangement, or the ability for us to acquire the land over the long term. But it's very clear that we need to have an agreement in place with them by the end of August. They're aware of that, and I do believe that they will meet that timeline. So they know that it's the biggest risk to the project, and I believe that they will meet that.
Just coming back on the first point about the funding, it would be an absolute shame if we really do not get it, because, you know, as we know, this all started to reconnect, you know, the canals together. And if we got to this point in time and then it didn't happen, it would be absolute devastation for, I think, for Stroud. So much work has already been done. So sorry, this is not really a question. It's more of I really hope that we do get it. Sorry.
Just end it with, isn't it? And then it's a question. Thank you, Lindsay. Katie and then Gary.
Thank you. I've got two questions, if that's okay. You mentioned that the National Heritage Lottery Fund would be looking for assurance from us to cover any shortfall in funding, I think, and increasing costs. Is that right? So, I mean, would there be an upper end to that? What sort of guarantee would we have to give?
That's a very good question. What's important to recognise is that Stroud District Council is the accountable body for this project. They scrutinise, and they're very much part of the team, and we have a very tight governance model in place. We review our cash flow and forecasts on a monthly basis. We have put in place a new governance model specifically around engineering. We put that in place over the last 2 years. We have brought in a new engineering team, and that team has the skills and expertise to actually deliver this project. And as a project board, we have the confidence in their capability and expertise to actually deliver this project. So we have taken significant risk out of the project. The two biggest projects are the M5 crossing and Walk Bridge. Both of those projects have been redesigned. The M5 crossing, we're getting to construction ready with known costs, and those costs have come down significantly with significant volunteer contributions towards that piece. There is more work to be done on Walk Bridge. We do have a design solution in place with them, which once again is more cost effective, has reduced costs. So you're absolutely right in that we do manage to have costs controlled and managed, but we would also with the right governance in place. So hopefully that gives you the assurance that you need.
Thank you. If I perhaps just invite Andrew to add any comments you might have from a financial perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and thanks, Katie. I think there's a couple of points here. I mean, the first of all, as the accountable body, this will work effectively as if it was one of our own capital schemes. It was just SDC, and for all of our capital projects, should there be a cost increase or another source of funding falls away, then it's effectively increases the cost to us. So we will need, as a council and through this committee, to monitor it very, very closely through the budget monitoring process, because you know it's easy to say it will be the same as any other capital project, but outside of the HRA, this is far bigger than any of our other capital projects. So the sums involved are bigger and therefore create a higher risk. So as part of the capital budget monitoring, I'm sure it will be looked at very, very closely. The relationship between the canal project and the finance team, as Chris says, has improved considerably, and the quality of the finance information that goes to the canal board has got a lot better. In terms of the funding side of things, in the financial implications, I have highlighted the couple of areas which are sort of most at risk, I think. the majority of the sources of funding are relatively clear. Obviously, we're really hoping for that 6.5 million for the lottery. It's an entirely different state of affairs if we don't get that money, which is why our funding is conditional. The GCC money is secure, as Chris has said, and CCT, they've still got to have their board meeting, but we know they're very much in favour. And Chris and I were both at the board meeting of SVCC last week, where they approved the 200. Albeit they're the smallest of the sort of canal trusts in terms of the funding. So that we don't know exactly what their financial position will be over the next few years, and they are very grateful for the support of the council as we work with them. There's obviously a sum in there for fundraising. That should be regarded as at risk because that's fundraising that hasn't been achieved yet. All of the canal trusts will point to their very, very good record at fundraising, and Chris will have many examples of that. And, I'm quite confident that they will get that money, but it's not in the bank now. So we have to regard that as being at risk. So we've got those budget monitoring processes to look at the costs. Chris and the engineering team have built in contingency on a much more detailed basis, but we've seen in the last few years that costs can increase, and we will also be monitoring the fundraising as that comes in, and I would suggest that should be reported to this committee as well. So it is a big step, absolutely, and it is higher risk, but we will monitor it in the same way we do the rest of our capital projects.
Lindsay.
I don't know if I've missed it in the papers. Can you tell me what we have spent to date on this project from Stroud District Council, please?
Originally, within the original bid, there was I'm just referring to Lucy here, 2.3 million within the original bid. And then a further £1 million was awarded from the Strategy and Resources Committee back in, I believe it was November 22. So it's 3.3 million to date. And then there was a further 160 million. Where did that one come from?
Difference in the development, the preliminary.
There was development costs and there was delivery costs. So it was transferred across from one to the other. So actually the actual amount contributed by the council to date is 3.46 million for delivery. Yep.
Sorry, I missed Gary out. So Gary next and then Bob.
Two questions from me. The first question is around this land agreement with Ecotricity. If we're unable to obtain that, how big an impact does it have on the project? And possibly an easier question, the access through Eastington Trading Estate and Oldbury Brook, how likely are we to get that?
I could answer that question, Chair. So, on the first question is that the acquisition of the Ecotricity land is absolutely critical. If we do not secure that agreement by the end of August, it's highly likely that the National Lottery Heritage Fund will not give an additional grant increase because it'll be too risky for them. So that is an absolute deadline that we have to have that agreement in place. And the chair of Ecotricity is aware of that deadline and aware of that risk and the impact it'll have to this project. So the project will come to halt if that agreement is not in place. The second question around access through the Eastington Trading Estate, we have a verbal agreement from the owner of the Eastington Trading Estate. He's been very supportive of this project. He continues to be engaged on a regular basis. We have very good working relationships. That agreement is being put in place. That is not at risk.
Thank you. Bob.
Sorry, three questions from me. The first one is, We've talked about the benefits of this project and the outlay of 3 point something million sounds like extraordinarily good value. Do we have any tangible, quantifiable, measured benefits that we can talk about of the project to date? Do you want the other two questions as we go, or take them one at a time?
On the tangible benefits, I would love to be able to reel off a definitive list of benefits and quote them to you. So we don't have that. However, we do have an independent monitoring and evaluation consultant. I did attach as one of the appendices the methodology which they are using. They will produce a very detailed report in November on all of the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. This is an independent consultant. They have done numerous lottery-funded projects, and we look forward to seeing that report. They did an interim report for us at the beginning of this year, which was very valuable, that identified that we are going in the right direction. We are making some significant outcomes. A lot of the benefits are around health and well-being. They're very difficult to quantify. The best way of actually understanding what the benefits are is go and take a walk along the canal and chat to the people who walk along there. That's the way that I found it. But I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, yeah. And the other two are easier, so I'll ask them more quickly. You talked about potentially leasing or long-term acquisition of the missing mile bit. Are there financial implications on that which would add or reduce the budget requirement? And my final question is, if the fundraising plan, which sounds like it's a good one, exceeds the 400k, what happens to the extra cash?
Both of which are very good questions. On terms of the leased option, it would be a long lease at a peppercorn rent. The lease that we have proposed and agreed with the lottery will be a lease of 250 years. So it'll extend the canal by a further 250 years. So it's a very important milestone to have. That will be peppercorn rent. We're actually hoping, and I do believe that Ecotrust are keen to do this, that actually they want the canal restored. They want to contribute to the success of this project. Their values are actually very similar to the values of the project. And I think they've got a lot to gain from it. And I think they'd be quite happy to hand it over to us, lock, stock and barrel, and to get the recognition for what they've done. And that's very much what we want to achieve from it. And there will be a cost saving to achieve that, which will be great. The second question on the fundraising, we do aim to exceed that 400k of fundraising. That 400k over the next 4 years is a very simple target to achieve. That's not at risk, which Andrew's brought out. We do actually need a further 550k to fit out Hyde's Basin, to operationalise it, to build out the moorings. So we want to go and secure not only that 400k of fundraising, but a further 550k, which will enable us to operationalise Hyde's Basin, to put the moorings, which will enable us to get the moorings revenue for the sustainability of the canal. The reason why we have taken Hyde's Basin and the fit out of the funding project is that was too big an ask for the Lottery Heritage Fund. We are able to secure reconnection, which was the purpose. Getting them to commercialise that was a step too far. That wasn't in the original bid. We put it in, we've taken it back out again. So it's the right thing to do, but we will secure that 400k of fundraising and more to secure the full fit out of the Hyde's Basin.
Perhaps we could approach Ecotricity to give us some funding for the stress and grief they've been causing us to enable you to meet that 550 more swiftly.
We'll volunteer you, Bob, to go and... I just wanted to say that I'm not sure I heard Chris say that, just to give an idea of the scale of the sort of benefit that we could expect, looking backwards in section 1.3 of the report, it refers to the latest estimate of 135 million for the kind of major inward investment and housing benefits from the already restored canal. So very significant numbers in terms of the opportunity. I think table 5 is quite helpful as well, not so much quantifiable benefits, but the ways in which this project supports our council plan objectives are set out quite nicely there. But Andrew's just suggested, and I think it's a good idea, that independent consultant report in terms of analysing the benefits, it would be great to have that come back to this committee as part of an update in due course so that we can look into that into a little bit more detail. Katie, you were next.
Yes, thank you. I was actually going to ask that very point because on the 135 million estimated benefits, I would like to see how that's broken down. I recognise it's inward investment and housing, but how do they come to that figure? That would be really helpful to have, I think, going forward. Thank you.
Great. I suspect we'll have to take that one away, but I'm sure we're happy to come back with that.
If I could follow up with that, please. Yes, thank you.
Great. Anything else? Yeah, Martin.
Mine's just a very simple question on the options. So, option 3, if we don't spend this money, it says that there's significant risk that the other partners would not follow suit, and all, like a pack of cards will just start falling apart. I mean, it says significant risk. Are we almost? I suppose you can't be certain that that's going to happen. But what's your inkling as to, it'd be a big ask for everybody else to, dip into their pockets and pick out that sort of money, isn't it? So if we just to get clarity and confirmation that if we don't commit this money, that's it. It's over, probably.
I do feel that we are at that position, and I think that the project partners, I think there's a right balance between the project partners and the National Lottery Heritage Fund. It's a big ask for them, it's a big ask for the partners, it's a big ask for the council, and I think we all need to play our part, and I think that's the way that it will pan out. If the lottery-funded lottery came out with a figure just short of the asking figure, then there would possibly be the opportunity. We would go back to the project board and say, this is the gap. Can we meet the gap or not? It depends on how big that gap is. And I think that is probably that's what we would discuss with the account manager on Tuesday, is that, what we'd prefer to have that as an option than a nothing option. We do want to keep this open. We do need funding to secure it. We're very close, but it's a big ask for everyone, and we feel that the ask is appropriate for everyone, including the National Lottery Heritage Fund.
Thanks, Chris. I've got Catherine next and then Martin Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Chris. In relation to 1.13 again, which relates to the Ecotricity land agreement, ideally we would have that in place before the submission of the updated bid in July. Is the time required related to the time to draw up legal agreements, or is it just to do with ongoing negotiations?
The time required is for them to seriously sit around the table and to make a decision. That's all we need to get them to the table.
Thank you. So all in Ecotricity's court. Martin Brown.
Yeah, thank you. And this question may be for Andrew, really, if that's all right. On the source, the source of the funding and the business pool gain, the expected 900,000 25-26. How confident can we be of that?
What an excellent question that is. So the projections, so the way the pool gain works is that we bring together all the business rates figures from across the county, and there's a mechanism and a calculation methodology to work out how much each party gets. Now, Gloucestershire has a very high rate of business rates gain across the county. It's actually why we stand to lose so much from the upcoming reforms. The figures that Lucy pulled together in February suggested, and obviously that's even in advance of the financial year starting, that Stroud's gain would be in the region of 980,000. It will be much higher than the 24-25 figure because of the way that the pool membership has changed and the calculation has changed. There is a risk that if one of the districts sees a significant reduction in its income, then that figure could begin to fall. We're not seeing that so far, and it would have to be a quite significant fall for us to fall below 900,000. And we do still have a business rates pilot reserve, which has some funding in it, which could make up the shortfall. So it is a risk. All funding is a risk, but it's a relatively low one. Gloucestershire, over the last 7-8 years, has fairly constantly sort of exceeded its expectations for growth on business rates. What I would suggest is that as pool leads, we produce reports to the Gloucestershire City Region Board throughout the year on how the pool is looking overall. And it might be worth, and I'm going to look to Lucy here, but it might be worth including an estimate when we do budget monitoring of what our share is looking like, because this will be the first time that STC has forward committed against it, if you like. Normally we have the situation like we see this evening where we look backwards, say this is what we've had and this is what we want to spend on it. But relatively low risk, Martin, I would suggest we monitor against it.
And were it unexpectedly to fall short, we got a plan B for where money might come from?
Yep. So the financial implications of this are they're sort of relatively vague, I will admit, and that essentially, we will have to consider the same process as we would for any other capital scheme. We'd first look to see, is there any in-year revenue funding? Are there any sort of reserves that we could use? Or I would suggest as a last resort, we could borrow the gap. It doesn't feel like there will be a big gap on the 900, but if there was, it would be legitimate to borrow towards the capital project.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I might read the decision. The committee resolves to confirm the council's commitment to acting as the accountable body in managing the grant from the Lottery Fund and the overall management of the project with the Cotswold Canals Partnership. The committee recommends to council to 1. Allocate an additional 1.5 million of council funding towards the completion of the Phase 1B Canal Restoration Project, as set out in this report, conditional on the award of extra funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. Number 2, reduce the capital budget for the canal project by a total of £49,000 as set out in this report, reflecting the additional contribution from this council and expected contributions of other sources. And 3, agree that, as the accountable body, the council is responsible for any funding shortfall or cost increase, save for the additional funding from the lottery application, without which the project would not proceed further. Do we have a proposer? Martin Piercy, thank you very much. And do we have a seconder? Helen, thank you. Helen, would you like to speak at the end? Great. So we move then into debate. Anyone like to make any comments? No? Oh, Lindsay, sorry.
Thank you. I think I did read that there was going to be over 10 million in social value with this as well. So I think, where did I read it? The Inland Waterways Associations and Canal and River Trust research puts the social health and wellbeing value at 2.7 million per mile per annum of restored canal, completing the final 4 miles of the Stroudwater Canal and towpath would therefore realise 10.8 million per annum of social value. I think the amount of money that we have put into it has actually been quite minimal, which is really quite astonishing, I find, for a project that, is tens of millions of pounds. And I think with the whole package that comes with it, we all know that this is something that has been, best way to put this, it's been supported cross-party for many, many years as well, this project. I think if we were to get to this point and not be able to finish it, it really would be a travesty for the whole of the Stroud district, not just Stroud, but whole of the Stroud district and beyond. So I actually think, what we're contributing is a very small amount to get quite a huge benefit. So yeah, I'll be supporting this.
Thank you, Lindsay. Steve?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll try and be brief because I think there's overwhelming sentiment in the room. I'm not sure this is to persuade anyone, but there's a tendency to talk about sort of in hard cash, especially I think when we're in strategy and resources, and when we're talking about value as well. We just haven't mentioned tonight, that a lot of the value of this whole project comes from volunteer and a huge volunteer base, and that's a really special thing that this is being driven by the community for the community, and that's a really important thing. But then more widely on value, to then backtrack and just talking hard figures. I mean, if we were to try and create a magic money tree, this is in some ways it. Like we're talking tonight about 1.5 million investment to get millions from partners put in to enable us to have over 6 million grant put into a project. Our total investment, just over 3 million, for inward investment of over 100 million and social value. Yeah, I mean, it's huge. I mean, it's really huge. And for me, it's a no-brainer to support. And I think it's a tribute that we do this on the back of all those volunteer hours as well. And it's something that obviously I'll be supporting.
Thank you, Steve. Gary?
I just want to build on that social value because it's a benefit that's felt by the whole of society. It's felt by our partners, by the health service, by the county, by lots of other organisations and the individuals of our district. And I think we're quite lucky to be in a position where we can make an investment in our communities. And this is an important one because it brings quite widespread parts of our communities together, especially when it gets over the M5. That feels a bit different with it being in the Vale and that sort of stuff. So it's really good to be linking this up, but we couldn't have done it if we weren't very well financially managed over a very long period. So we should be proud of our district that we can invest for our people.
Thank you, Gary. I think, Helen, we're back to you.
Thanks very much. I'm excited that everybody else is as excited as I am about this project. I'm sure, like me, you've all walked some of the canal. We walked from Stonehouse to the Missing Mile, and it was so exciting to see it. I want to thank, first of all, members, colleagues, for their careful questions on behalf of the Stroud community, because this is a difficult moment, a challenging moment. If I were running this project, I'd say it's like go, no go decision that we're making here. So the questions have been really on point. I'd like to thank Andrew Chris's team for the financial care and management, the risk management, cost reduction, potential gap management, again, careful, thoughtful. So we've heard about the volunteers, but the one thing we haven't mentioned this evening is that lovely evening when it was featured on Countryfile. I was getting emails, WhatsApps from canal enthusiasts, from family members who are all excited about this. And we've heard about the health, social, economic, environmental value for the district, but this is also the same for the UK as a whole by encouraging, I hate the word staycations, reducing our carbon footprint further by having such a wonderful attraction on our doorstep. So we've talked about the huge volunteer commitment across the district. I think it's something like 400 people regularly. My belief is that people will be fighting to be on the starting line on the opening date, and I'm really looking forward to that day. So guess what? I'm supporting this project. Thank you.
That's lovely, Helen. Thank you very much for those words. I'd just like to bring in Catherine quickly before we come back to Martin Piercy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to echo Helen's comments, really. Huge thanks to Chris, the whole project team. It's been an enormous piece of work to prepare this paper and all the work that sits behind it. And it really is crunch time for the project. We're making a big financial commitment this evening. It is quite a visionary project. Slightly crazy idea, isn't it, to recreate a canal that had been filled in, but there are so many benefits. Benefits from the project we've seen so far, I think, in terms of the Connecting Communities angle that you've mentioned. Engaging with schools and young people, I think, has been hugely beneficial through the course of the project. Young people from the local area, but more widely as well. The volunteer skills and events that have happened, the heritage learning, the partnerships that have been created through this project. So the partnerships in terms of the Cotswold Canals Connected team, but also the boat mobility, the snack, the archives, the textiles trust, just so many volunteers. I think you mentioned 400 people. I feel like there are thousands of people in some way across the district associated with this project. So it is a big commitment, financial commitment for us, but I will be supporting it this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure what I can add really to all those words that have just been said. Only to echo and add my thanks to Chris for all his time spent on producing this report, and of course all of the work that the canal volunteers and the trust have done over many years in actually getting the project to where it is now. There's been if you add up all those volunteer hours, that'll be an enormous figure. This is something that is of national importance. This is on a national scale. This project. One of the few things I think within Stroud that is on a national scale, and it brings so many people together. It's of benefit to the residents, and it also benefits visitors as well. It brings tourists and visitors in as well. It does have some risk, but I think the report clearly states and quantifies that risk. But when you weigh that against the benefits, the investment that's already been put on, and as Lindsay said, there's been many of our predecessors around this table that have spent time, money, effort, and really committed to this project in the past. And I think it's on our own is to support that legacy really, and therefore continue to go forward with our eyes wide open on this fantastic national scale project that will benefit so many people on so many different levels. So I will be supporting it, and I think I was going to say I hope everybody else supports it, but I think I've got the feeling that they might. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Really great to hear from so many members there. I particularly enjoyed seeing yesterday Gloucestershire Wildlife Trust sharing a post on Facebook from the Canals Connected site saying that it was one of the most impactful projects that they've been part of. So that was really pleasing to see. So we'll move then to the vote. Please raise your hand if you're in favour. And that's everybody. Lovely. Great. Thank you very much. So that passes. So we move now to item 10. Thank you, Chris. Which is the update on the canal side on the A419. I'd like to introduce Keith Gerard, our Strategic Director of Communities, to present this report. Over to you, Keith.
Thank you, Chair. This is an update report on the progress of a community group in Stonehouse, which is working to develop a business case for the canal site, the 419, formerly known as the Ship-In site. In the past, it's been a site with some sensitivities about it. A decision was made to bring that HRA site into the general fund and to provide the opportunity for the community to look at ways in which it might be developed for community benefit. There were a couple of pieces of consultancy work that were done at the time, and one of them by a company called the Union Collective said something which was, I think, really important in resonance, which was this was about the community voice. So there's been quite a focus since October 23, when the decision was made to provide the opportunity for a community group to look at the use of the site on community voice. This update report, I hope, gives committee some confidence that the community group that is working on it, the Spice Group, has close support from Stonehouse Town Council and from officers, including from the canal team. I think this report hope gives some confidence that that group is on the journey of working hard to understand the community need and to look at the opportunity to develop the site. There's a big piece of work for that group to do, and it'll be coming to a future meeting with its business case and its proposals. But I thought helpful for the committee to consider the work which is ongoing and to keep it, if you like, a sight line of committee on the work that was going on, because I think there will be a decision to be made by this committee at a future date. Thanks.
Thank you, Keith. Right, any questions for Keith? Nope. Catherine.
Chair, and thanks Keith for the update. It's really useful to see the progress. So the next stage is the development of the business case and the ongoing work from the SPICE group. I just wondered if you could set out the future work that you see that evolving and how that might be reported back to committee, or how members can engage with the community group, or whether the Stonehouse members are already sort of engaged and involved in that work. Thanks.
Stonehouse members are engaged in the process. I think it would be quite appropriate for members of this committee and other members to see the site and to understand the work that is going on, because actually visually seeing the site is very helpful. The Canal Festival will use part of the site on Sunday, but there is an opportunity, and I can help facilitate if members of the committee wanted to find out more and do a visit and meet some of the community group that is working on it. In terms of the next steps, it might be appropriate to bring an update report to this committee before the final piece, but that isn't planned at the moment. I think it would be helpful for the committee to have a good understanding of what's been going on as part of that process. It may be that more information can be brought to committee before the final submission.
Sorry, thank you, Keith.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? No? I'm just going to note that I think we've got the wrong date on the decision at the moment. I think that's probably meant to be spring 2026. Is that right, Keith? Yeah. So if we could just have a friendly amendment, if that's all right with everybody. Yeah. Okay, super. So I'll just read that out then. The committee resolves to note the report and the work done so far, together with the development of a business case for the site by spring 2026. Do we have a proposer for this one? Martin, thank you. And a seconder? I'm happy to second. I don't have a great deal to add other than thank you very much for the update. Really nice to see that we've got some lovely events coming up if members wanted to attend those. So Street Art Day on the 3rd of July, the Door Takeover on the 20th of July, Nature Day on the 27th, and then on the 3rd of August, Water Sports Day, which looks excellent, as well as the main Canal Festival this weekend on Sunday, which has been really good fun in the last few years. So if you wanted to share those across your network, that would be great. So we'll move to debates. Anyone got any comments? Yes, Martin.
Yeah, just to say, I remember the difficult discussions around this site a couple of years ago and going down there, and this really feels like progress, and now you can start to see that something good could happen there. So pleased.
Really encouraging, yes. Anybody else? No. Catherine.
I have been down to visit the site, and it's really great to see how it's developing. Certainly, it is all about the community voice, and it feels like the community is stepping up in terms of the work that has been done with the Community SPICE group, with other partners, working with the council, and linking back to our previous agenda item on the canal. There are such great opportunities for this site. And those upcoming events look fantastic. So I wish them well with the development of the business case over the next year, and look forward to hearing a bit more about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nobody else? So Martin, would you like to finish up for us?
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, I think this is, yes, it's another good news story, isn't it? There was, as Martin mentioned earlier, a bit of an issue a couple of years ago, but it seems to be turned around. I mean, clearly the community are very passionate about it, and it's great to see that. and I think they're taking a very sensible approach in terms of doing interim work, getting use of the land now, through the sort of work and having those days and, temporary structures, etc. And then thinking about, the longer term use of it and not wanting to overdevelop it. So, I think it's just, again, another great story, and I wish them, every success in realising their final outcomes, really. And what a great name for a group, Spice, Spice Group. Well, I want to be part of that Spice Group, wouldn't you? Maybe it's a certain age, I don't know, with certain another group that maybe goes back a few years. Anyway, I really want to support this, though, and I encourage everybody else to support it.
Thanks, Martin. So we move then to the vote. If you could raise your hand if you're in favour. Yeah, that's everybody. Thank you very much. So we will move now to item 11, appointments. We just need to appoint tonight our performance monitors for this group, this committee, and I'm really glad to see that we have 2 nominations tonight. The performance monitors carry out a scrutiny role and are typically members of the opposition political group. These appointed members will examine the work of the council and report back to committee on the progress made against the relevant items in the council plan. So we've received nominations from Councillor Robert Brown and Councillor Helen Caton Hughes. Do we have any other nominations? Don't be tempted, Bob. Please raise your hand if you're happy to support those nominations. Got to vote for yourself, Helen. Okay, super. So I think that's everybody. So that's really great that we've got those roles in place. Thank you. So we'll move on then to item 12, which is our officer member reports. And these are just to note, but very happy to take questions on them. So if we just start with the performance management report for the 4th quarter. Any questions on that one? No? Okay. Leadership Gloucestershire, update on that one. Any questions? No. And the Strategic Planning Advisory Board, any questions on that one? No. Okay, lovely. So then we'll move to the work programme. We've had a bit of a session on this already, but does anybody have anything that they would like to add to the work programme tonight? Got quite a full agenda for the 2nd of October already. Katie?
I would just like to ask if it's possible for the local government reorganisation proposal, or certainly an update, to come to this committee before November to give us an opportunity to input.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So we've got an information item coming in October, item H there. So we can have questions to that item. We've actually, in November, penciled in a decision item, but I think having discussed with members that actually the feeling is that probably the real decision is at council, and we don't want to rehearse that decision in advance because we want all members to feel part of that. So if members of this committee are happy, we will take that item off the November meeting. And Katie, were you thinking in October a decision item or no? Okay.
Not necessarily, but to have the opportunity to discuss and be engaged in the process before it gets to the decision point would be useful.
So I might just ask Andrew, do you think we maybe need to upgrade the October item to a kind of report to note then, rather than a
Yes, potentially it could be a report to note. There won't be a decision in October. I think, as you both just said, the real decision will be in November and is for council. I think it's worthwhile mentioning as well that when Kathy's back next week, I'll be speaking to her about setting in a programme of member briefings for, perhaps every 6 weeks over the next few months before November, so that members are updated on changes. But I think a report to note in October is fine, and then the decision at council in November.
Yeah, I think that's helpful, just so we bake in that opportunity for debate and to do that in public. I think that will be useful for everybody. Okay, anything else from anyone on the work programme? Nope. Okay, lovely. Well, thank you very much for your participation tonight. If I could just remind members to take a look at your pigeonhole before leaving and have a good evening. Thank you very much.